Even though spring has just begun, there's still the potential of numerous snowstorms moving through the United States this week and into next week as well. If we were to take a look at the latest depiction of the European model at this time, we do see that there's a big ridge located right around the eastern half of the United States that's bringing a stronger southerly flow that's bringing the warmer air further northward. It's currently a weaker ridge, but this ridge is expected to become stronger, which will be key in terms of determining the track of the next few storm systems moving through the United States. And taking a look at the West Coast, we do see that there's a powerful trough just off the central California coast with a millibar pressure of 984 millibars. There's plenty of cold air behind it, plenty of instability, and of course we're seeing a high level of convection where we're seeing snow in the higher elevations of Nevada, California, Utah, and even Colorado and New Mexico are getting involved with snowfall, and we're seeing heavy rain right up along the coast of California and even portions of Arizona. So you want to pay close attention to the possibility of flash flooding and of course heavy snowfall in the higher elevations over the next several hours, because it's going to be very impactful and you need to definitely be aware of those possibilities. Now, moving forward, this whole pressure system is expected to weaken as we head into the Wednesday and Thursday time frame. This is primarily due to the fact that it's gonna cut off from the jet stream, sort of, and that would mean that it's gonna cut off from receiving enough instability or enough convective available potential energy to continue to intensify. So we're gonna see this trough weaken, but we're gonna see a trough just to the east of this low pressure system located along the coast that's going to move towards the northern Midwest and bring a decent amount of snow to North Dakota, South Dakota, and the northern portions of Minnesota, where you could expect anywhere from 1 to 3 to 3.6 inches of snow from this small low pressure system moving through. It's far from necessarily being a very powerful storm system, but it is at least something to be aware of potentially for your late Tuesday into early Wednesday commute. So you need to be aware of that possibility for the northern Midwest as we continue on into tomorrow, where we're going to see the snow move through even portions of northern Michigan and Wisconsin. Now, moving forward with the forecast, our more powerful storm system is expected to build by next week, because we're going to see this trough that's going to linger right over the four corner states. There's going to be plenty of cold air behind it, and we're going to see just enough cold air just move just south of the United States border that's going to encounter the strengthening of this ridge located in the southeast. That's going to create a very highly convective environment for our next potential storm system to develop. If we were to continue to move forward, we see that this low pressure system develops by the Thursday to Friday time frame, and in the southeast you need to be aware of the possibility of flash flooding and severe weather, as it is likely there's going to be enough instability for that to occur. So expect large hail, damaging winds, and possibly an isolated tornado, but this will primarily be more of a damaging wind threat associated with some of these supercell thunderstorms. And there's of course that possibility of flooding, flash flooding associated with squall line that's this elongated. So you want to be aware of that for the southeast. And moving forward, when it comes to the northern Midwest or the northeast, there's that possibility of snowfall. We see that the millibar pressure of this storm system is hovering around 992 millibars. This storm system, by the way, is expected to move northward because this ridge is expected to strengthen as we approach late this week and into the weekend time frame. That will force the storm system to move northward, and that will force it to encounter the cooler air mass that's of course centered right over the northern Midwest as well as the northern northeast, where we do see that Iowa gets involved with potentially heavy snowfall, Wisconsin. And as for Chicago, it's going to be a fairly close forecast, but most likely it'll be pretty much almost entirely a rain event for the Chicago area as well as the metropolitan areas surrounding Chicago, as it seems like the ridge will be just a little bit too strong. That will create more. That will create a southerly flow that's a little bit too strong for the temperature to be cool enough to support for snow precipitation in the form of snowfall in Chicago. So this will primarily be a rain event for Chicago, most likely. Same goes for Detroit, at least for this specific snowstorm. But we do see that Milwaukee could eventually get involved with snowfall, and we see the pressure continues to drop as the storm definitely strengthens. And you need to be aware not only for the possibility of heavy snowfall, but gusty winds, because with a millibar pressure this low, of course, the higher pressure air mass surrounding this low pressure system is going to want to filter in to where the air pressure is very low, and that's what's going to create the winds surrounding the center of circulation. So expect gusty winds as well, along with that heavy snowfall in Wisconsin and the extreme northern portions of Michigan. And we see that for Northeast, the European model is expecting that there's going to be just enough cold air centered in the Northeast, at least during the early weekend, where some portions of Northeast initially will experience snowfall before eventually changing all over into rain once the southerly wind component of this storm system really moves further northward or raise that temperature up. But you still need to be aware of that possibility of snowfall just before it changes over to rain, where maybe areas as far south as Boston could receive snowfall. But in this scenario, it seems like the European model is mainly relegating the snowfall just north of the Interstate 90 corridor. And if you don't know where exactly that's located in the Northeast, that's pretty much right in between Boston and Albany. This is where the I-95 corridor moves to the Northeast. And I'd say if you're north of the Interstate 90 corridor, then you're more likely to experience snowfall. But south of that, you're definitely less likely to experience snowfall. There's still could be variations with the forecast, but it seems like southerly winds will be a little bit too strong for this to be much of a significant snow event if you're just south of the Interstate 90 the Interstate 90 corridor. So Boston and New York City, you're more likely going to experience rain rather than snow, but it is pretty much for New York City, it's very likely it's going to be all rain. But for Boston, you might experience some accumulating snowfall. Going to be a very close forecast. I'll keep you guys updated, but as right now, you guys aren't receiving any accumulating snowfall. So moving forward, we do see very heavy snowfall for Maine, New Hampshire, as well as Vermont as well. So we want to pay close attention to that. And this storm system will eventually weaken once it cuts off in the jet stream and really cuts off from the warm air mass that was providing so much convective available potential energy. So this storm should definitely not be as significant once this approaches the same longitude as the Northeast. Now, moving forward beyond this storm system, there's still that possibility of future storm systems. We still have the European model wanting to take a pretty powerful nor'easter by next week, but it is still very far out. So take it with a huge grain of salt. So I'll keep you guys updated if we really see that forecast persist into next week. But other than that, just be sure to be aware of this next potential significant snowstorm from the northern Great Lakes, as well as portions of the northern Northeast, where it is likely at this point that I don't expect any major variations with the forecast. It seems like both of the two main computer models are having a really good agreement regarding the exact trajectory, the exact strength of the storm system. So I don't expect any major variations with the forecast, so make sure to prepare accordingly in portions of northern Midwest and the Northeast. Now let me show you guys the GFS model scenario. The GFS model is showing a very similar forecast, but there is a small variation in the forecast, which for some people could make a big difference regarding the amount of snowfall accumulation you should experience, especially if you're close to the rain snow line. So moving forward with the GFS model, we see that this storm system will weaken just like the European model forecast, as again, it's going to lose a lot of that warm convective available potential energy that's just to the south of it. But we're going to see this trough continue to move eastward along with the cooler air mass that's going to eventually encounter the warmer air located located in the southeast that will create potentially severe weather conditions in the southeast. So make sure to be aware of that, and of course snow further northward. Now it's interesting in the GFS model scenario because we see that in this scenario, Chicago does actually experience a little bit of snowfall, and the snowfall is relegated quite a bit further southward than what the European model is forecasting at this time, as the GFS model is expecting that this ridge will be just a little bit weaker than what the European model is stating. So we should see the storm take a trajectory a little bit further southward to allow the snow to move a little bit further southward. And we do see this very heavy snowfall. Milwaukee would definitely be in for potentially over 6 inches of snow, and same goes for northern Michigan as well. And we see the millibar pressure drop quite a bit down to 981 millibars. Like I said, this will likely produce gusty winds as well, thanks to how low the pressure is. And we see that for northeast, what's interesting is that the GFS model doesn't expect as much snowfall to move as far south as what the European model is stating, which is definitely interesting because it wants to bring the snowfall further southward in the Midwest, but not necessarily the Northeast, where it's bringing snowfall a little bit further northward, where the GFS model is expecting that the southerly winds will be a little bit stronger thanks to a lower pressure than what the European model is forecasting. So we see the warm air move a little bit further northward on the eastern side, which is the reason why the snowfall is a little bit further northward and northeast than the European model. But the Midwest, a lot of the areas further southward and a lot of the more populated areas will get involved with a more significant snowstorm. So we're going to need to pay close attention to how this ridge builds by next week, because that'll determine who will receive snowfall in the northern Midwest. And now taking a look even further with the GFS model scenario, we see that it does weaken in a similar manner. And if we were to continue to move forward, we see that this cold air will, the GFS model expects the cold air to stay persistent for much of the northern United States. So winter might not be over just yet for certain areas in the northern Midwest as well as the Northeast. So you want to be aware of that possibility that there could be snow even as we approach the later portion of the winter time. Taking a look at the European model's forecast when it comes to a 500 millibar height anomaly, by the time this low pressure system is located at the longitude of right around Oklahoma City, we do see that there's a very strong ridge that's going to steer this storm further northward, and that will relegate the snow more to the northern Midwest and the northern Northeast thanks to this big ridge. But the key thing is that this ridge is a little bit stronger than the GFS model, which is what I'm about to show you right now. There's a GFS model's forecast when it comes to a 500 millibar height anomaly. You do see that it's very similar, and you probably won't notice any significant differences, or if any differences at all. But there is certainly a difference where the ridge is weaker in the GFS model scenario, which will allow the storm to move further, to take a trajectory further southward and bring the snow further southward into the more populated areas such as Michigan, the Milwaukee area, and even as far south as Chicago. So we're going to need to pay close attention to really how strong this ridge will be, and we won't get a good idea until I'd say late this week, into the Thursday and Friday timeframe. Once this storm system is located in the midsection of the country, that's when we'll get a really good idea of how strong this ridge will be. So I'll keep you guys updated, but for the most part, it should take this general trajectory, but this could make a difference, especially when it comes to if you're close to the rain snow line when determining how much snowfall you'll receive. This is a GFS's model snowfall forecast over the next 6 days. We do see that the snow is, of course, relegated a lot further southward than what the European model is stating, but this will be a very significant snowstorm. Milwaukee could potentially experience close to a foot of snow. Same goes for northern Michigan. Chicago is right on the border between experiencing very heavy snowfall to no snowfall at all, which makes this forecast very close for the Chicago area as of right now, if we were to base this off the GFS model forecast. And we do see that the snow is a little bit further northward in the GFS model's scenario in the Northeast, but there could be another clipper system that moves in by next week after this after this initial snowstorm, which could bring some snow to northern Pennsylvania as well as upstate New York by the midweek of next week. This is a European models forecast, and while you do see the snow, an area of snow that's southward into Chicago and Indiana, this is associated from a clipper system that's more in the long-term future, so take this with a huge grain of salt. From this snowstorm that's expected to move through by this weekend, the snow will be a lot further northward, where we do see the snow is mainly relegated just to the northwest of Milwaukee. We do see some snow as well in Iowa as well, where Des Moines could potentially get involved with close to 6 inches of snow. And we do see that this snow is mainly going to be relegated just north of the Interstate 90 corridor, most likely for the Northeast, but you should expect over 6 inches of snow for much of the interior Northeast, and probably 1 to 3 inches for southern upstate New York and northern Pennsylvania. So make sure to be aware of that. So here's my snowfall forecast over the next week. Keep in mind, I didn't put necessarily numbers associated with the snowfall accumulation forecast, since it is still relatively far out and there still could be variations with the forecast. But in the pink, that's where you should most likely expect a major snowstorm to move through within the next 5 days. So make sure to prepare accordingly. And if you're in the blue, that's where it's a little bit more uncertain, but there is a possibility that you could experience major snowfall in the blue, just less certain. But I will say for certain that the pink areas you see right here will experience a major snowstorm, and it's a little bit more uncertain in the blue areas. So make sure to stay tuned for more updates regarding this snowstorm that's going to move through the Midwest and Northeast by this weekend and beyond, where we could see more snowstorms even though we're entering the end of winter. So make sure to be aware of that. But I thank you guys for watching.